a soldier. How embarrassing. I tell people she works in logistics. My mother said that to a table of 40 people. I let her finish. I want you to remember that I let her finish because that is the whole story, really. I did not stand up. I did not correct her. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, the way I had folded them at 100 dinners before that one, and I waited for the laughter to pass. But to understand that night, you have to understand 30 years. You have to understand the patience that gets mistaken for weakness and the silence that gets mistaken for shame. So let me take you back, before the candlelight and the toast that went too far, to a quieter kind of war. The one I had been losing in that house since I was a child. My name is Claire Whitfield. I am 38 years old. I am a major in the United States Army, an officer with a gold oak leaf on my collar, which is the rank you reach when the people above you decide you can be trusted with other people's lives. I have been trusted with a great many. My mother, Eleanor, has never asked me about a single one of them. She has, however, asked me to pass the salt with a kind of polite contempt that could strip paint. I did not always wear the uniform. Once I was just the second daughter, the quiet one, the one who read the manual before touching the machine. My sister Dana is 3 years younger and 3 shades brighter in every room she enters. She laughs easily. She forgets names and is forgiven for it. She is the kind of person who walks into a party and the party rearranges itself around her, and I am the kind of person who counts the exits. Our father understood the difference. He had served too, 22 years, an enlisted man who came home with a bad knee and a steady hand. He never bragged. He taught me how to read a map and how to stand still when I was afraid. He used to say that the loudest person in the room is rarely the one in command. I did not understand that until much later. I understand it completely now. He died when I was 26, the year I made captain. My mother wore black beautifully and accepted condolences like a woman receiving guests. I wore my dress uniform and folded a flag into a tight triangle and handed it to her, and she set it on a shelf in the den where it gathered dust between 2 photographs of Dana's dance recitals. Let me tell you about the recitals, because they explain my mother better than I can. When I graduated from officer training, the ceremony was on a Saturday in May. It is a formal thing, a long thing, and at the end of it you have crossed a line you cannot uncross. My mother came. She sat in the 3rd row. And she left 40 minutes early before the commissioning oath, because Dana had a callback for a community theater production across town, and somebody had to be there to clap. Somebody had to be there to clap. I have thought about that sentence for 12 years. So this is the first thing I need you to understand, and it is the small thing this whole story turns on. If you have ever been the dependable one, the one who does not need handling, the one whose wins are quietly filed away while someone else's are framed and hung in the hallway, then you already know the rest of this in your bones. Stay with me. I promise you it does not end where it begins. The pattern in our family was never loud. That is what made it so hard to name. There was never a screaming match, never a slammed door. There was only a steady, itemized accounting of where I stood, delivered in a tone so warm you could mistake it for love. My mother was very good at warmth. It was her camouflage. She had a habit, when she introduced me, of softening what I did until it disappeared. At her bridge club, I was Claire. She does something with supplies for the army. Very organized, always was. At a neighbor's barbecue, I was my daughter the paper pusher. She keeps the trains running. At a cousin's wedding, when a man in a good suit asked what I did, she answered for me before I could open my mouth. Logistics, dear. She counts boots. I count boots. I have commanded a company. I have signed for equipment worth more than this entire neighborhood. I have stood at 200 hours in places I am not going to name and made decisions that sent good people forward and prayed every one of them came back. Most of them did. The ones who did not, I wrote letters about by hand because a soldier's family deserves ink and not a form. I count boots. I never corrected her. Not once, not in 12 years of dinners. And people have asked me why. My battle buddy from my first deployment, a captain named Reyes, who knew my actual record because she lived it beside me, asked me that very question over coffee about a month before all this. She had met my mother exactly one time and called her, with great delicacy, a piece of work. You let her say that, Reyes said. About logistics. You just sat there. She's my mother. She's wrong. Being wrong about me is the only power she has left, I told her. If I take it from her, I take everything. And then, what is she? Reyes looked at me for a long moment. You sound like your dad. I did. I do. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one in command. But I want to be honest with you, because this is not a story about a saint. There was a cost to all that quiet. It collected somewhere I did not look at often. It collected in a drawer, actually, in the bottom drawer of the dresser in my apartment, under the spare linens, where I keep two things I have never shown my family. The first is a folded set of orders. I am not going to tell you yet what they say. I will only tell you that they are the kind of orders that change the way a soldier signs her name, and that I read them 3 times the day they came, and then I folded them in thirds and put them away. I did not call my mother. I knew what she would say, and I did not want to hear my own news made small. The second thing in that drawer is a medal. It came in a flat blue box with a hinge. I opened it once the day it arrived, and then I closed it and put it under the linens with the orders, and I have not taken it out since. Not because I am ashamed of it. The opposite. Some things are too heavy to keep on a wall, where the wrong eyes can land on them and turn them into a story they have no right to tell. So there it sits, a drawer with my whole career in it, folded and boxed and out of the light. You should remember that drawer. It matters more than I knew at the time. Now, the engagement. Dana had met a man. This was always going to be a production, because everything about Dana is, and my mother had been planning the dinner for weeks the way other people plan small wars. The fiancé's name was Danielle, and he was, by all accounts, a kind and serious man, a little older than Dana, quieter than her, which I thought was probably wise. I had met him twice. He shook hands like someone taught him to mean it. What I noticed about Daniel was not Daniel. It was his father. I met the older man at a casual lunch a few weeks before the formal dinner, the kind of meet the families thing my mother arranged so she could inspect the merchandise. He was tall, late 60s, silver at the temples, with a stillness to him that I recognized the way you recognize an accent from your own hometown. He sat very straight without seeming stiff. When he stood to greet me, his weight settled evenly, heels together for half a second before he caught himself, and relaxed into a civilian's slouch. You can take the man out of the service. You cannot take certain things out of the man. And there was a ring on his right hand. A heavy class ring gold, worn smooth on the inside band, the way a ring gets when a man has turned it on his finger 10,000 times across 40 years. I could not read it across the table, but I knew the shape of it. I knew the school it came from, or I thought I did, and if I was right about that school, then I was right about a great many other things. And the man across the table from me was not a stranger at all. He was family in a sense my mother could not begin to understand. He caught me looking. Just for a second. His eyes went to my posture, to the way I held my own shoulders and something moved behind them. Not recognition exactly. The beginning of a question. He said, "Claire, is it? And what is it you do?" And my mother, God bless her, answered before I could. "Oh, Claire's in logistics. Very steady work. Somebody has to count the beans." And she laughed, and the table laughed, and the older man did not laugh. He looked at me a second longer than was comfortable, and then he nodded. Slowly, the way you nod when you have decided to wait and see for yourself. I said nothing. Of course I said nothing. I had 30 years of practice saying nothing. But I will tell you that, on the drive home that afternoon, for the first time in a very long time, I felt something other than the familiar dull ache of being made small. I felt the smallest, quietest sense that a door had opened somewhere in a room I could not see into yet. I did not know what was behind it. I knew only that the man with the ring had looked at me the way my father used to look at me. Like he saw the whole of a thing and was simply waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. The formal dinner was set for the following Friday. 40 guests. My mother had hired a caterer and rented a private room at a restaurant with low gold light and tall windows, and she had spent, I am fairly sure, more on that one evening than I spent in a quarter on my own life. Dana would be radiant. There would be toasts. There would be a seating chart, and I already knew, without being told, exactly where I would sit. To the side. Near the end. Close enough to be present, far enough to be forgotten. I told Reyes about it on the phone the night before. "You don't have to go," she said. "I do, though." "Why?" "Because she's my sister. And because if I don't go, the story becomes that I couldn't handle it. I am not going to give her that. What if your mother does the logistics thing again?" In front of 40 people? I was quiet for a second. I was standing in my kitchen with the lights off, looking at the dark window. And I remember thinking about the drawer in the other room, the orders and the metal under the linens, the whole weight of a life kept folded and out of sight. "Then she does it," I said. "I've survived it before." I believed that when I said it. I want you to know that. I genuinely believed I could walk into that gold-lit room, take my seat at the wrong end of the table, absorb whatever was coming, and walk out the same composed, silent, dependable woman I had been at every dinner of my adult life. I was wrong. Not about whether I could survive it. About which one of us would not. Because here is the thing I did not factor in, the variable I had no way to see. I had spent 30 years controlling the only thing I could control, which was myself. My silence. My bearing. My refusal to give anyone the satisfaction of a reaction. I had built my entire piece around the certainty that no one in that room would ever know who I actually was. I forgot that there are some rooms where the truth does not need me to speak it. Some rooms have other people in them. People who were taught the same things my father taught me. People who turn a heavy gold ring on their finger and watch a quiet woman sit too straight at the end of a long table and wait and then decide it is time. The man with the ring would be at that dinner. He would be seated near the head of the table in a place of honor, a guest of the highest standing. And he had spent the entire lunch a few weeks earlier asking himself a question about me that he had not yet answered. He was going to answer it on Friday, in front of everyone. I just did not know it yet. She told herself she could survive one more dinner. I told myself that, standing in my dark kitchen with the phone against my ear and a folded set of orders in a drawer down the hall, I was right that I would survive it. I was wrong about which one of them would not. I survived the drive. That part was never in doubt. The restaurant sat on the third floor of a glass building downtown, A private room my mother had booked 4 months in advance. She liked rooms with a view. She liked being able to say the word reservation in front of people who had not made one. There were about 40 guests when I arrived. I counted them the way I count everything, by instinct, by habit, 3 tables of 12, and a head table with a gap on the end where they had put me. Candlelight. White linen. A string trio in the corner playing something soft enough to talk over. Dana stood near the windows, in a dress the color of champagne, her hand on her fiancé's arm, glowing the way she had been raised to glow. My mother moved between the tables like a host at her own coronation. She had a glass in her hand before the food came out. That mattered later. I noticed it and filed it and said nothing. I wore my dress blues. I want you to understand that I did not wear them to make a point. I wore them because it was a formal evening, because they were the most formal thing I owned, and because somewhere underneath the discipline, I am still a person who wanted, one time, to walk into a room and not have to apologize for my own life. The insignia on my shoulders is a gold oak leaf. That is the rank of major, an 04 in the Army, according to the official insignia guides. Nobody at that table could have told you what it meant. I had stopped expecting them to. My mother found me near the bar. She put one hand on my sleeve and squeezed, the way she does when she is about to perform affection for an audience. "You came in costume," she said. A few people near us laughed. "Isn't that sweet?" I let her finish. "It's a uniform," I said. Quiet. "Even." "Of course it is, dear." She had already turned away. That was the warm-up. I knew the rhythm by then. 30 years teaches you the rhythm of your own mother. The first dig is always small, almost playful, designed so that if you flinch, she can call you sensitive in front of witnesses. I did not flinch. I took my seat at the end of the head table, on the side nobody faced, and I poured myself water and I waited. What I had not accounted for was the second man at the table. The groom's father. His name was Robert Hale, and he was somewhere past 70, silver hair cut short and squared off in a way that civilian barbers do not do by accident. He sat across and 1 seat down from me. He had a class ring on his right hand, gold, heavy, with a small blue stone. I had noticed it the moment I walked in. West Point class rings have a particular weight to them. I did not say anything. He had not said anything either. But twice in the first 20 minutes, I caught him looking at my shoulders, and then at my face, and then back down at his plate, working something out behind his eyes. I knew more than I let on about the family Dana was marrying into. I had done my homework, because that is what I do. The Hales had 3 generations in uniform. The groom himself had served 4 years before he ever met my sister. Nobody at our end of the table talked about it, because in my family service is the thing you mention once and then bury under a punchline. But I had seen it on the groom the first time I met him, the way he stood when an older man entered a room, the way he said, "Yes, ma'am," without thinking about it. He came from people who understood the language. I just did not yet know how much his father remembered of it. The toast started with the salad course. The maid of honor went first, then the best man, then an uncle who told a story that ran 4 minutes too long. Then my mother stood up. She tapped her glass with a butter knife. The trio went quiet. 40 faces turned toward her, and she let the silence sit for a moment, because she has always understood that a held pause is its own kind of power. I will give her that. She would have made a competent officer if she had ever once pointed that talent at anything but her own children. "I want to say something about both my girls," she began. Warm. Generous. The voice she uses in front of strangers. Dana, my beautiful Dana, who is marrying into such a wonderful family. She gestured at the Hales, and there was applause. And Robert Hale nodded once, polite, his eyes already drifting back toward my end of the table. And Claire, my mother, turned to me, and her smile changed. It got tighter at the corners. My oldest, who has always been so practical. Light laughter. The word practical hung there with a little hook in it. When the girls were young, Dana wanted to be a dancer, a singer, something with a little color to it. She pressed a hand to her chest. And Claire wanted to join the army. She said the word army the way you might say the word landfill. I tried to talk her out of it. I really did. I said, "Claire, sweetheart, you could do anything." And she said, "No, Mother. I want to carry boxes for the government." That got a real laugh. A round one, the kind that rolls across 3 tables. I kept my hands flat on the linen. My water glass had a ring of condensation under it, and I watched it spread. Carry boxes for the government. I thought about the drawer at home while she said it. There is a set of orders folded inside that drawer. 3 pages, signed at the bottom by a man whose name my mother would recognize if she ever read past the front of a newspaper. There is a box behind the orders, dark blue, the size of a deck of cards, and inside the box is the reason I was given those orders. I have never shown either one to anyone in this family. Not because I am ashamed. Because the day I learned what they cost, I learned that some things are not for the dinner table. My father would have understood. He carried his own quiet for 40 years and took most of it into the ground with him. I had simply decided to do the same. She was not done. She lifted her glass higher and looked around the room, gathering them, making sure everyone was with her before she swung. "A soldier," she said. And she shook her head, slow, theatrical, a mother grieving a wasted child. How embarrassing. I tell people she works in logistics. The room laughed. Loud this time. Somebody at the second table actually clapped. My sister laughed too behind her hand, an old reflex she could not stop even on her own engagement night. 40 people, candlelight, my mother, glowing in her own spotlight, and the joke landing exactly where she had aimed it, squares in the center of my chest, in front of everyone I was related to. I did not move. I want to be precise about this, because it is the only part of that night I am proud of. I did not stand. I did not raise my voice. I did not reach for the 30 years of receipts I carry, the orders folded in a drawer at home, the box behind them that no one in my family has ever seen or asked to see. I held still. In my line of work, we have a word for what you do when the room turns against you and panic would be easy. We call it bearing. You hold your line. You do not give the situation more than it has earned. So I held my line. I let her finish. I set my glass down without a sound. And across the table, Robert Hale stopped looking at his plate. If you have ever been the quiet one in a loud family, you already know exactly what this room felt like. And if a story like this is your kind of story, the channel is full of them. So take a second to follow along before we keep going. Because this is the part where the night turned. And almost nobody in that room saw it turn. It was not loud. That is the thing people get wrong about how these moments break. There was no gasp, no record scratch, no villain getting what was coming to her in a single satisfying blow. The table simply moved on. My mother sat down to her own applause and reached for her wine. Dana leaned in to whisper something to her fiancé. The trio started up again. The salad plates went away and the entree came out, and 40 people returned to their own conversations as if nothing had happened, because to them, nothing had. But 2 of us were not part of that table anymore. I felt it before I understood it. The way you feel weather change. Robert Hale had gone very still in a way I recognized, because it was the same stillness I was holding. He was not eating. His fork was down. His eyes had stopped moving around the room and had settled fully on the gold oak leaf on my right shoulder. Then they moved to the left shoulder, confirming what he had already seen. Then to the ribbon bar above my breast pocket, reading it the way only a man who has worn one himself can read it, top row first, left to right, in order of precedence. I watched him read me. I let him. There is a kind of recognition that passes between two people who have stood in the same formations, sworn the same oath, learned the same insignia off the same charts. The army publishes those charts. Every soldier learns that a single gold oak leaf means major, and a silver one means lieutenant colonel, that the bars and leaves and eagles and stars are a language, and that the language does not lie. He was reading a sentence my mother could not even see was written, and what it told him did not match one word of the joke she had just made. His jaw worked once. He looked at my face, and for the first time all evening, someone at that table looked at me without performing anything. No pity. No mockery. Something closer to alarm, and underneath the alarm, something that looked almost like apology, as if he were sorry he had laughed at the uncle's joke earlier, sorry he had let himself sit through any of this. I gave him nothing back. Not because I was cold. Because I did not yet know what he intended to do, and the worst thing I could do was make it about me before he decided. So I picked up my fork. I cut a piece of the chicken I had no intention of tasting. I let the table believe the moment was over. It was not over. It was loading. My mother, oblivious, leaned across 2 seats toward Mrs. Hale and started in on the seating chart for the wedding. Who would sit where, which cousins could not be near which cousins. She was happy. She had landed her joke, and the room had loved it, and the night was hers. Dana caught my eye once across the table, and there was a flicker there. Just a flicker, the thing that lives under all of this between my sister and me. The old guilt she has never once said out loud. She looked away first. She always looks away first. Robert Hale had not touched his plate. He turned to his son, the groom, and said something low. I could not hear the words. I could read his son's face, though the confusion on it, the small frown of a man being told something at the wrong moment by a father who never explained himself. The groom glanced at me, then back at his father, then at me again, and the confusion deepened into a question he did not have the standing to ask his own father at the table. There is a chain of command in every room, if you know how to see it. It does not care about the seating chart. It does not care who booked the reservation or who is paying for the flowers. It is older than any of that, and it runs on a single principle. You recognize what is true, and you give it its due. Robert Hale had spent a career inside that principle. You do not unlearn it. It does not switch off because you have retired, or because you are at a dinner, or because the woman in the uniform is sitting quietly at the end of the table, letting her mother make a fool of her. He set his napkin on the table, folded it once in half the way men of a certain training fold everything. He pressed both palms flat against the linen. My mother was still talking. Something about lavender centerpieces. Her voice filled the whole end of the room. I knew what was coming half a second before it came. The way you know a wave is going to break, by the way the water pulls back from the shore. I felt the 30 years gather behind me, the drawer at home, the folded orders, the box no one had opened, my father's quiet pride that I had carried alone since the day we buried him. I felt all of it stand up inside me while I sat perfectly still. And then, at the head table, in the candlelight, in front of 40 people who thought they had already seen the most important thing that would happen. That night, Robert Hale pushed back his chair and rose to his feet. He did not say anything at first. He just stood there for a second, one hand resting on the white tablecloth, the other at his side, and the room kept laughing for another 2 or 3 seconds before people started to notice that the groom's father was on his feet and was not smiling. My mother noticed last. She was still finishing her own joke when the laughter thinned out around her, and she looked up at Robert Hale with the bright, expectant face of a woman who assumes a man stands up at her table to agree with her. He was looking at me. I want to be precise about what happened next, because for years afterward, people at that table would describe it 3 different ways, and only one of them is true. Robert Hale was 71 years old. He had served 34 years. He had retired as a 1-star, which means a general officer, and a man who wears that for 3 decades does not lose the habit of it just because he takes the uniform off. He stepped back from his chair. He squared himself to me the way you square yourself to a flag. And in a dining room full of crystal and candlelight, and people who thought my name was a punchline, he came to attention, and he saluted me. A salute is a small thing. It is the right hand, fingers together, the tip of the middle finger near the brow, the forearm at a clean angle. It takes 1 second. I have given and received maybe 10,000 of them over 15 years in uniform. But a salute is also a language, and everyone who has ever worn the cloth understands the grammar of it instantly. The junior initiates. The senior returns. And in that room, in front of 40 people, a retired general had just initiated one to me. The room went silent, and not the polite kind of silent that comes when somebody taps a glass for a toast, but the other kind, the kind that means everyone has realized at the same moment that they got something badly wrong and are now waiting to find out how wrong. I stood up, because you do not stay seated for that. I came to attention, and I returned his salute, and I held it the regulation beat, and then we both dropped together, clean, like 2 people who had done it 10,000 times, because we had. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice carried across the whole table, because he meant it to. "Major Whitfield. It is an honor to have you at my son's table." Major. I watched the word land on my mother's face. I have thought about her expression more than I would like to admit. It was not anger. Anger would have been easier for both of us. It was confusion, the specific confusion of a person whose entire map of the room has just been redrawn while she was holding it upside down. She had spent the evening, she had spent 30 years, telling everyone within earshot that her daughter pushed paper in logistics. And a general officer had just stood up in her honors place and called me by a rank she did not know I held. "I'm sorry," my mother said. Her voice was small now. "Major?" "Major Claire Whitfield," Robert said, and he was not unkind about it, which somehow made it worse for her. "Oh, 4. Your daughter commands a battalion-level logistics element, ma'am. 800 soldiers. She runs the supply and movement for a forward sustainment brigade." He paused. "Which is to say, she is the reason an entire combat formation eats, drives, shoots, and gets home. Without her job, nobody else's job happens. I commanded men for 34 years. I would have given a great deal to have an officer like your daughter. 800 soldiers." I had never said the number out loud at that table. I had never said any number at that table. I had let the word logistics sit there for years, undefended, because it was easier than explaining, and because every time I tried to explain, my mother heard a brag, and I heard myself begging. I did not have to explain anything now. Robert Hale was doing it in the flat, unbothered tone of a man reading a citation, and the room was leaning in to listen the way the room never leaned in for me. This is the part people get wrong when they tell the story. They think I won because he embarrassed her. I did not win because he embarrassed her. He never raised his voice. He never said a single word against her. He simply told the truth in front of witnesses, and the truth, said plainly, did all the work that 30 years of my silence had refused to do. Dana had gone pale. My little sister, the one who always had the spotlight handed to her, was staring at me like she had never seen me before. In a way she hadn't. The groom, her fiancé, was on his feet now too, beaming, because of course he had known. He had grown up in this. He had recognized me the moment I walked in, the same way I had clocked his father's class ring at the very first dinner and said nothing. 2 people in that room had understood what was coming. Now everybody did. If a story like this one has ever made you sit up a little straighter, you already know the channel is built for exactly that feeling. So, consider sticking around. Now let me tell you what I did with the silence. Nothing. That is the whole secret, and it is the hardest thing I have ever done. I did not make a speech. I did not turn to my mother and say, see what I have been carrying. See what you reduced to a filing cabinet for 3 decades. I had imagined that speech 100 times. I had it memorized. And standing there with the entire room finally looking at me the right way, I discovered I did not want to give it. The speech was for the version of me that still needed her to admit she was wrong. That version had retired sometime in the last 60 seconds, quietly, without a ceremony. So I did the only thing that mattered. I looked at Robert Hale and I said, "The honor is mine, sir. You raised a fine officer's worth of a son. I'm proud my work crossed paths with your families." And I sat back down. That was it. That was the entire revenge, if you even want to call it that, and I don't. I returned a salute correctly. I accepted a recognition I had never once asked for, and I let the room do the rest. The dinner did not recover. There is no graceful way to resume a conversation after that. My mother tried twice. The first time she reached for her wine glass and her hand was not steady. The second time she said, to nobody in particular, I always knew she was doing well, which was such a complete reversal of everything she had said for 30 years that 2 of the guests actually exchanged a look. I did not correct her. There was no point. Everyone at that table now held the same fact, and a fact that 40 people hold cannot be edited by the person it embarrasses. Here is what I understood, sitting there with my water glass, watching my mother rearrange the past in real time. Respect that you earn in silence outlasts ridicule that you perform for an audience. She had spent 3 decades performing my smallness for whoever was listening, and it had worked. Right up until the moment one man, who actually understood what my rank meant, simply stood up and named it. Rank is not granted by the people who mock it. Dignity is not theirs to hand out or withhold. They never had it to give me in the first place. I had it the whole time. I just kept it in a drawer. I should tell you about the drawer. When I got home that night, I did something I had not done in 11 years. I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser in my old bedroom, the one I kept at my mother's house for holidays, and I took out the folded set of orders and the small flat case I had hidden there the week I made major. I had never displayed them. Not once. My mother had been in that room 1,000 times and never knew what was 18 inches under her own folded linens. The orders were my command assignment. The case held a meritorious service medal awarded for a deployment where my element kept a supply line open for 9 months without a single soldier going without, across some of the worst terrain and the worst weather the job has. It is not a glamorous award. There is no movie about the people who make sure the water and the ammunition and the fuel arrive. But Robert Hale knew exactly what it was, because 34 years of command had taught him that the war is won by the boring people, The precise people, the ones who never raised their voice. I had hidden it because I had learned, young, that bringing anything home only gave my mother something new to minimize. So I stopped bringing things home. I let her keep her story. And in keeping it from her, I had almost let her keep it from me. I took the orders and the medal out of the drawer that night, and I packed them and I drove home. And the next morning, I hung them on the wall of my own house where I could see them from my desk. Not for anyone else. For me. 40 years old next spring, and it was the first time I had ever let myself look at my own record on a wall in my own light. I thought about my father a lot in those days. He served 22 years, and he died when I was 26. He never once asked me what I did at work in a tone that needed managing. He just asked and listened. And on the day I commissioned, he stood in the back of the hall in his good jacket, and he did not say much because he did not have to. My mother turned my career into a thing to apologize for. My father had turned it into the proudest quiet of his life. I had spent years letting the loud one define me. Robert Hale's salute did not give me anything new that night. It just handed me back something my father had already given me, the part I had folded up and put in a drawer the day we buried him. My mother called me 11 days later. I let it go to voicemail the first time, not out of spite, but because I genuinely did not know what I wanted to say. When I called back, she was careful with me in a way she had never been. She asked, for the first time in my adult life, an actual question about my work. Not a setup. Not a joke with my career as the punchline. A question. I answered it. We talked for 19 minutes. It was not a reconciliation, not the kind they've put in movies, but it was 19 minutes of being seen. And I will take 19 real minutes over 30 years of performance. The wedding went ahead in October. I wore my dress uniform because the groom asked me to, and because I had finally stopped pretending the uniform was something to hide. Robert and I ended up next to each other at the reception, two career people swapping shorthand, and at one point he leaned over and said something I have kept. "You never told her," he said. "All those years. You never once corrected her." "No, sir." He nodded slowly, the way old commanders do when they have decided something about you. "That's the part most people miss," he said. "Anybody can demand respect. Takes a particular kind of soldier to deserve it and not need the room to know." And then he raised his glass, just slightly, just to me, and we both let it sit there without saying anything else, because we did not have to. I told myself that was the end of it. The salute, the drawer, the 19 minutes, the wedding, a clean arc, the kind of story you finally get to set down and walk away from. But there was one more thing, and I almost missed it, the way I almost miss everything that matters about my mother. At the reception, near the end of the night, she pressed a small envelope into my hand. She did not explain it. She just said, "Open it when you're alone," and walked back to her table with that same unsteady dignity she had carried out of the engagement dinner. I put it in my jacket and I forgot about it until I was back in my hotel room at 1 a.m, still in uniform, too keyed up to sleep. Inside was a single photograph I had never seen, and on the back, 4 words in my father's handwriting and a date that was 11 years old. The same week I had hidden the medal in that drawer. I have not decided yet what I am going to do about what was written there. Some folded things, once you open them, you cannot put back the way they were. If you made it all the way here, thank you for sitting with this one. There are more stories like it on the channel, so stay close, and I will see you in the next.